So folks, good evening and welcome to another session of Overland Live. Today's the 6th of February and we'll be kicking off, and pretty much we've got our guest speaker who you see lurking in the background, and that's Toby Savage, and I'll run through a bit of an introduction in a short while. Please, if you can, just give us the thumbs up on the audio quality. We had a few issues last week, so we have detuned the video, so it's a little bit more low res. And then we've also had a look for now of embedding the presentation. And the unique thing that we will be doing is trying a video. So in theory it should work, but if you could let us know how that goes, we'd appreciate it. The usual contact. Please feel free to get in contact with us if you have any questions or any comments, or if you have any thoughts of future guest speakers. We're always for new ideas. So just ping us an email and let us know. We've got a few more sessions lined up, and then we will take a bit of a break as we line up new guest speakers. So in 2 weeks' time, so just to repeat, there's no session next week, but the first one is the 20th of Feb. And this is actually a repeat session featuring Henny Rotenbach from the Overland Forum. Unfortunately, last week we had a few audio qualities, so we had to postpone the talk. And then the first weekend in March will be a slightly different session, and I'm actually going to be hosting it, and it will be focused on creating Overland websites. So it's going to be a little bit more interactive. I'm going to be asking for a few more questions from the various guests that are live, and we'll have an open microphone. The reason behind this one is that we see a lot of Overland websites being generated, but I have lots of questions around the type of content. And so today, or the 6th of March, we'll be discussing the type of content that people can put on their websites and what we think it works well, be it audio or video. And then on the 13th of March, Scott Brady from the US will be hosting a West Coast time zone vehicle modifications. So this is going to be a US version, and it will kick off at 1900 hours, so 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So for us in the UK, that's about 3 a.m. So you certainly won't be finding me on that call, and it will be very US focused, focusing on the US vendors as well. We will be bringing on a UK version of that. Please just hop on Overland Live just to see if there's various different up and coming talks. And thanks again for using the website just to pre-register. It helps us in terms of having a account and being able to get the right number of lines associated with this up and running. Our sponsor for the last couple of weeks has been the Overland Journal. I know quite a few of you are on today, but those of you that haven't seen it, it's kind of like the National Geographic of the Overland world. It's a US publication, but it has a very international feel, which is very good. At the same time, our speaker today, Toby, has published an article or two in some of the past editions, which is very good. So in terms of the past editions, they're still currently available. I have one in front of me, and it's actually the winter 2008, where Toby wrote an article. This leads me into introducing our guest speaker today. So Toby Savage has been traveling the North Africa now for a few decades. His Carawagon Land Rover is famous on the sand dunes, and his voice and face is very famous as he's co-hosted the DVD driving series with Chris Scott. Back to the Overland Journal and his article about the Great Lakes of Libya. I thought I'd read you one paragraph and then we'll hand over. Our convoy pulled out of town like a group of settlers off to find a new world. It is always a novelty to drive on tarmac, then just pick a featureless spot and turn off onto the desert. No sign, no tire marks of others, just virgin desert. From now onwards, we will be relying on GPS waypoints, a big printout of satellite imagery provided by the geographers. So that's the type of writing, and with it, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, Toby Savage. So Toby, welcome to Overland Live, and thanks very much for taking the time out to join us and share about your upcoming trip, and at the same time, your various different expeditions that you've led in the Sahara.
Thank you very much, Martin. You can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
good.
I can hear you. That's good.
Good. Okay, well, yeah, thanks for inviting me on. It's very flattering to be asked to come and talk about my travels, mainly in Libya, but also in other parts of North Africa, as you point out. And it's, in fact, over the last 14 years I've been going to Libya. I only got back here at 9 o'clock last night from my latest trip to Libya, so it's all been put together rather quickly, but I hope I've not made too many mistakes with PowerPoint, and I'm going to try and talk you through it. But please interrupt with text questions, which I can see at the bottom, and I'll do my best to answer them as and when. So to kick off, which I think, yes, here we go. I found the button to press. So no, Martin, we're on the old one. Damn.
Okay, Toby, just go back to Quick Start again and just share the application, the PowerPoint, like you did the previous time.
I thought we had it working, didn't we? And it's disappeared.
No, it will still be there. Just go back to
share the file or the application.
No, share the application and then the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, perfect. Now, if you hit your space.
Right. Yeah, we're there.
We're there. Great.
Good. Sorry about that. Yeah. So
perfect.
The old car wagon's now done 10 Sahara trips, and I'll just talk you through it. But for all those who own Land Rovers and former Forces, we like to sort of swap details of what we've done to them. So I bought this 15 years ago with a view to doing exactly these sort of trips, and over the last 10 or 12 years, obviously it's had quite a lot of things replaced and quite a few modifications. But the previous owner fitted it with a galvanised coil-sprung chassis. So I left the factory in 1970 as a Carol wagon conversion, and then this guy spent quite a lot of money on having a galvanised chassis fitted and the coil springs from I think a 1984 110. So essentially it became a 110. It did have the V8 petrol engine, but I swapped that for the 200 TDI engine. It now has an Ali Sport intercooler as well. So it's got a bit of poke. The suspension's all old man EMU, fairly standard size, not uplifted or anything, and it has 6 Michelin XS tyres for the desert and BF Goodrich all-terrains for normal use. I carry 2 sand ladders from my son's business, Matt Savage in Matlock, and they're smaller and lighter than the standard item, but certainly have got me stuck quite a lot in the sand. The accommodation inside is remarkably comfortable and very roomy. So with the roof popped up, it's 6'2" inside and has a sort of 3/4 width bed, and I find it very comfortable to live in. There's also a fridge, a cooker, cupboards, pretty well everything you can need, inverter for electricity. So in terms of a vehicle ideally suited for overland trips, I'm very pleased to have it, and it served me very well. This latest trip, which we left the UK on the 28th of December and drove out down through France, through Tunisia and into Libya. And the first part of the trip was with a group of geographers who are looking at the way the Sahara's changed over the last several million years. So we're all keen on overland travel in the desert as well, and we have in white Land Rover Mustafa Salim, a retired professor of geology in Tripoli, in his V8 110. His friend Osama in a beautiful old early 1980s Toyota Troopy, and myself and Nick Drake from London in the Carawag. Now, having peeled off the road, I guess about 200 miles south of Tripoli, we were onto this flat gravel plain, and we drove for 2 days across this, and it is unchanging. It's quite bizarre. It's a sort of area north of the Ubari Samsi where it's just gravel. So an unchanging landscape virtually. We weren't very fast, probably 40 miles an hour, but this was my view. How fast did we end up driving? Well, about 45 miles an hour, I guess is about right. You can get the odd problem, so, well, plus the things won't go much faster than that. There was some soft sand, and the Toyota was incredibly heavy because both the Toyota and the V8 Land Rover were a bit quiet. Okay, I'll raise my voice. Both the Toyota and the Land Rover, the V8 Land Rover, were petrol, so they had to carry double the fuel that I had to carry. So we needed a range of about 800 miles. And 800 miles in a big petrol engine is a hell of a lot of petrol. So the Toyota was quite good at getting stuck. There's police checkpoints out in that wild area, and you have to check in and say who you are, and you have to have letters from the government body to say you're allowed to be there. Because we travel without a guide, which is a great privilege, we're able to travel without a guide because we're invited there by the Libyan government to do this research work. But we still have to have a travel permit and show this at the police station. So we carry probably 10 photocopies of the permit and leave them with the police station. You can see the guy on the right's got his Kalashnikov just in case we presented a threat. But they were all very cheerful, and we shared a cup of tea with them and carried on our way. We use GPS systems, obviously, to find our way around, but they are linked in with geo-referenced satellite imagery purchased from NASA some years ago. So we can see every dune and work out exactly where we are. So this is just an impromptu meeting with Mustafa, Nick and Osama, with Kevin White from Rent in the background, who's just coming over to sort of put his bit in, and a little group looking for the edge of a dried up lake bed out in the desert. I think these maps are public domain, but you have to buy them from NASA. But Google Earth is pretty close in clarity now, particularly for the desert areas, because it's such good weather. It involves a lot of desert driving, which is great fun. So this is looking at these dried up lake beds, because that area of the Sahara was once a lake. It's been a lake 5 times in the last 150,000 years. A massive lake, 140,000 square kilometres, roughly. By looking at the shorelines of the lakes, we find artifacts from the bygone age. So you get sort of prehistory stuff and stuff, well, ranging from 100,000 years old to 2,000 years old, when really people migrated away from that area because it was too dry. But the desert driving is great fun, not for the faint-hearted and requires quite a lot of practice, but as Bagnall found before the war, it is possible to traverse most of this terrain in a car. There's very few things that will stop you once you've got a bit of practice. The scenery is stunning, and this is a pretty clear indication of the once being a lake there. So you can see the slip layers in the rock strata behind. And what they do is take samples of rock from different levels, and I bring it back to the UK for analysis. So I've just driven back with a Land Rover that must have weighed about 4 tons of rocks, which raised a few eyebrows at the customs, particularly the Libyan to Tunisia customs. They said, "What? Why do you want to bring all this rock back?" And I had a list, each bit, rock, sand. Anyway, from analysing these bits of rock, they can tell when it was wet and what was going on there. There are also artifacts, and these are stone hand axes and things that go back anything between 50 and 100,000 years. So they were made by a Neanderthal person, a nomad who would have been travelling through here. And because so few people visit the desert, there's a lot of it left. So you just wander around, and it will be perhaps covered in sand for 50,000 years, then the sand moves, and it comes to the surface again, which is when we pick it up. Driving back to camp in the evening, as the sun sets and the dunes glow a beautiful orange, and you get these long shadows. This is actually my Land Rover taken from the driver's window. So these long stilt-like things are the wheels, and the bodywork's up at the top. So it's very evocative. It's a lovely time to be in the dunes. And half an hour later, they go grey and dark and look quite menacing, really. On this particular trip back, we did have to drive at night, but we'd driven out that morning and knew there were no hidden dips, no dangers. We knew it was just this flat travel. But it's very weird driving purely on a GPS bearing without any peripheral information. So you can't see anything to the left or right. You can just see what the headlights pick up. And there's a new moon in the distance, which is that white speck, if you can see it. So it's rather spooky, and you have to have great faith in your knowledge of the area from the morning and the GPS, and not vary from it at all. So we would probably put in about 10 waypoints over about a 50-mile trip and just follow them. So that last hour and a half was quite exciting. We couldn't camp out there because we'd already set the camp up somewhere else. It was there, so we were going back to that camp, camping in the lee of June as wind, and we were there for 4 nights. So all the camping gear was there, so there's no option to just stop and fly camp. Now that was this part of this year's trip, but my interest in the long-range desert groups really goes back a bit further. This is 4 years ago, when we sort of sneaked a bit of a holiday in the middle of all the work and had 3 days to go and visit WWII, which is the volcano down in the sort of central to eastern area of Libya. And if you look on Google Earth at Libya, you will see this large dark blot down in the bottom right-hand corner. That is WWII. It's this black surface is made up of the ashes that were thrown out of the volcano, which is in the picture behind us. And there are 3 oases there, which the local guides will tell you are a different colour, but actually they're not. They're just water. But it's a beautiful spot, and it has this vast crater with the actual core of the volcano in the middle. It's quite a young volcano as well. It's under 1 million years ago that this happened. So in terms of old volcanoes, that's quite young. So we spent 4 days driving there and back, and actually camped quite close to that. This is the territory that the long-range desert group drove through on their attack on the Zouk and their runs to Kufra. Based in Cairo, they embark on these 1,000-mile plus trips through this area. So there's still the odd bit of stuff lying around, and it's reading accounts of it. These are the areas that they were working in, and there's the odd truck still there. So there's the crater of WWII, and Namus stands for mosquito, so it's the area of the mosquito, which I can verify. If you walk down to the water, there's a lot of mosquito action going on down there. Beautiful spot though. It's weird seeing this black sand. No, you wouldn't want to drink the water. It's disgusting. Very saline, because it evaporates and it's a concentrated saline liquid. It would be very difficult even to bathe in, I think. Looks nice. Part of the journey there and back involved driving a very wide wadi called WWII Kabir. And WWII Kabir is like well, I suppose it's about a 5-mile wide flat valley with some raised ground on the left and right, the north and south. Now, reference is made in long-range desert group books to travelling along WWII Kabir and how it's very lacking in cover from aerial attack. So they used to camp in the rocks or in the sand dunes at the side of the wadi for a little bit of protection. So we did exactly the same. We photographed here in the middle of the wadi, and then in the far distance you might just be able to see some raised ground. So that was the area we chose to camp. And quite by chance, the area we camped in had these petrol tins lying around. Old petrol tins that would have been used by the British Army in the war. 1941, it's stamped on this one, and it's got bullet holes in. Now, 1941 was the year they invaded Mosul, but it was January, so maybe this was a later raid and they were using the same route. There's other little bits of engine. I think they look like some the tops off some valve springs and a few nuts and bolts and bits of glass from a headlight rim, bits of canvas. So we found all this just in a half-hour walk around this site. Collected a few tin cans. I'm not sure that they're as old, but the Shell petrol can is certainly wartime. So this sort of increased knowledge and well, it doesn't rain out there, so things don't rust very much. Some years ago, I went with Kevin White, Chris Scott, and a few others to Egypt, and we did a run right down to the Gil Kabir and Jebel al-Waynat in Toyotas and Land Rovers, but rather than take our own, we flew into Cairo, and a friend of mine, Mahmoud, sorted out the vehicles and took us on I think it was nearly a 2-week trip right down through long-range desert group territory. This is Big Cairn, which is a very famous long-range desert group landmark, and then we drove on south from there in much the same way as they would have done. But you know, we were on their territory, able to get a pretty clear indication of just how heroic they were, because it's tough going, and you know, we were in pretty comfortable cars, they weren't. This is the Gil Kabir. It's a plateau the size of Switzerland, sitting down in the southern part of Egypt. So on the eastern side is Egypt, and on the western side is Libya, and to the south is Sudan. It's a long way, and it's a very awe-inspiring rock outcrop that just rises up. You got a bit of that question from Alec. It said, what? Within that complex of rocks is the Shaw's Cave, where the swimmers are that were featured in the film The English Patient. So these are tiny. What sort of temperatures? Well, we always go in January, when, speaking from very recent experience, where it's absolutely perfect. It's about 25 degrees centigrade in the daytime, a bit chilly at night, just about down to freezing at 5 o'clock in the morning. So you're a bit chilly then, but by 10 o'clock in the morning, it's beautiful. So this is Shaw's Cave here, where the swimmers are. It's the southern edge, more or less, of the Gil Kabir. Well, there's one name that springs up in every story of desert travel by car and of the long-range desert group. That's that of Ralph Bagnall, who Chris Scott's man looks a bit like me in that picture. I think if I wore a similar hat, I could almost pass as a replica of the great man. So, if anyone doesn't know Bagnall, he was an academic and an adventurer. So, well, I think he was a bit younger than me in that picture. And stationed in Cairo between the First and Second War, Bagnall and his pals used to go on ever more ambitious trips into the desert in Model T Fords and then Model A Fords. So they mapped most of the Sahara that within the sort of 1,000 miles of Cairo, and their knowledge was going to become very useful later when we were at war, because no one else had knowledge of the desert. Before that, before they mapped the desert, it was just a great area of nothing. So this got me researching long-range desert group activity, and they used mainly Chevy and Ford 3000 back trucks, but later they used a Jeep as a fast, lightweight alternative to the heavier trucks. So I started looking through the Long Range Desert Group website. It's a very good website, lrg.org, which has a lot of photographs, one of which I've taken here. I'm very sorry if I wasn't supposed to, but it'll be on in a minute. So this is guys cooking up dinner with a Jeep in the background. And I thought, well, I've always quite liked Jeeps anyway. I've always had Land Rovers, but never a Jeep. And there's a lot of photographs. I think these were taken by the photographer Cecil Beaton, who was a famous chap. And this is sheltering from a sandstorm behind one of the Chevys. Now, I drove back up to Tripoli in a sandstorm last week, and it is not pleasant. I've not driven in one before. We had 5 hours, and that was on tarmac of a constant 40-mile-an-hour side wind full of sand. And it gets into everything. Land Rovers leak at the best of times, and mine's probably worse than most, but we were in company with a new TD5 and even that leaked. So the sand gets everywhere. So they're dressed very appropriately with scarves and glasses and sheltering in the lee of the wind. But images like this sort of start to inspire a chap. You know, you think, well, that looks good fun. And I think these were publicity shots done at the time. And I very much doubt whether they were on a real mission. But that sort of open Jeep, air blowing in the wind, unwashed, unshaven, it has an appeal which I'm sure a lot of chaps will understand. The thought that one could do the same thing now on land that is virtually unchanged is quite attractive. So I thought, well, maybe we need to have a look at doing something like this. It looks fun. You know, I've done quite a lot in the Sahara, and I enjoy that. Why not take it a step further and try and what these guys did? So I got in touch with Mahmoud, who's a friend of mine in Cairo, and he's of a similar interest. So he loves the desert. It was him we travelled to the Gulf. I met him back in '99, and we did quite a bit of stuff in Egypt then, around Bahariya and the White Desert and the Black Desert, and then ended up in Siwa. So I contacted Mahmoud and said, look, what do you reckon? He said, oh, yeah, there's lots of stuff, wild enthusiasm. And he sent me pictures of trucks he'd found out there. I don't know whether this is a Ford or a Chevy, but you can just see the remains of a V8 engine there. So this is almost without doubt the remains of a long-range Desert Group truck. Excuse me. This has probably taken about 5 years ago, so I guess a few bits have been rubbed off it since then. I'm pretty sure that's a Ford, that one. Anyway, it sort of inspires you to think, well, it'd be quite nice to have a trip that visited some of these as well as doing the routes, as others have done. But you see, doing it in a Toyota or a Land Rover is quite easy, really. Quite a few of us have done trips in the desert, but I didn't know anyone who'd done one in an old Jeep. So the mind was working. I thought, yeah, the vehicles are still there, quite a lot of them anyway, because it's too difficult to rescue them. So I got thinking, who do I know who'd be up for this? My thoughts immediately turned to John Carroll, a friend of mine, who's a fellow journalist and has been a Jeep fanatic all of his life, I think. And so I phoned Jonathan and said, "Fancy this, John?" Without hesitation, he said, "Yeah, I'm in on that." The other chap was Sam Watson, who I know is joined the group. Sam is something of an expert. He's lived in Cairo for a while. He's travelled a lot in the desert out there, and wrote his master's degree thesis on the Long Range Desert Group. So you couldn't wish for a better chap to have along. His knowledge of the activities of them is very good. Then I started looking for inspiration, and I went to a few of those sort of war enactment shows, which have been quite interesting. I didn't go for the dressing up bit, but I went with my camera and photographed a replica of a long-range Desert Group Jeep. I thought, well, that's what I need. I need one that, minus the guns, but something like that, that's painted up in those colours and will at least look authentic. But the main priority was to make it go well. You know, it doesn't have to look pretty, but have to go well. The grill's missing. I think they cut the grills out to possibly improve cooling, or to make it easier to scoop the sand out, they got filled with sand. I don't know for sure, and I don't think there's anybody left who can answer the question, but it is the look of the long-range desert route. And the can on the front is a condensed, so the water from the boiling radiator fills that up, and then it cools down and gets sucked back into the radiator. So I bought a Jeep. This is a 1943 Ford, which I bought, well, it's now 3.5 years ago. And it didn't run, but it seemed okay. It was a California import, not much rain in California, so basically it was in very sound shape, and I bought it off some friends of mine here in Leicestershire who do quite a bit of importing old American vehicles. It went up to my son Matt's place in Matlock, and was dismantled. It had the wrong engine in, but that didn't matter too much because it didn't work anyway. Basically, it seemed all right. It had to then have a complete rebuild. All the things that were moving would be replaced. So it's new bearings, new brakes, new brake lines, new clutch, new gearbox, seals, new prop shaft joints, new shock absorbers. So virtually everything that was going to be moving was replaced in the rebuild. The body tub just needed a new floor section, which unfortunately, Jeep parts down over in Shrewsbury sell every part you'll ever need. So with the new floor pan, I've got thousands of rebuild pictures and just bought the best. And a brand new engine, again from Jeep parts. It's a Hotchkiss French engine, rebuilt by the French Army probably 30 years ago, but to all intents and purposes, it's new. So I shoved that in the back of my other Land Rover and drove it back, and it was fitted, and the whole thing was given its first coat of paint. Then we did the wiring and the lights, got the lights working and all the electrical components, which was fiddly. Then it was sort of drivable. We had a quick run up and down the test track, which is a farm drive. And it seemed to go very well. A few snagging jobs to do. You'll note that we cut up a replica grille, not the original, so I still have the original. Then it had its coat of primer, and then it was finished. And I picked it up December 2 years ago and drove it back at night in December down the motorway. It's 60 miles from there to here. It was pretty cold, but it rolled along nicely about 55 miles an hour. Yeah, it was a hot hat sound actually. Keeps my ears warm. Anyway, one was not going to be enough. So earlier, well, last year, 2010, I just chatted with John and Stan about the trip, and I thought, well, it's no way we can do it with just the three of us. We're going to need more people to help fund it, because it's very expensive. So I phoned up my pals again and said, "Have you got another Jeep?" They said, "Oh, yeah, a Willys, an 1943 Willys, also California imports." So I bought that. Unfortunately, it's been a good year. And Matt got ready with a sledgehammer. We got it up to Matlock, and the engine on this one was original and was pretty good. So at least I didn't have to buy a new engine for it. And not long after that, at the beginning of December 2010, both were finished. The Willys isn't registered yet. Well, it might be by now, but it wasn't before I went to Libya. And there's no interior in it yet, but that should all be finished about now, actually. And so we took them for a test drive in the fields, and both of them went very well. So we're now equipped with a plan, 2 Jeeps, and a detailed itinerary and support on the other side from Mahmood, who'd arranged a logistics company who would take us down there and follow in a pair of Toyota Land Cruisers, so that we don't have to sit in the Jeeps all the time. They're quite comfortable, but I'm not so sure about a 12-hour day one. The test run went very well, and I made a video of this which went on YouTube and on the blog we're doing for the trip. It was minus 15 that day, and the Willys came from Matlock over to this area, and the Ford we drove up from Leicester with no roof, with all our clothes on and the hat sound. So then the plan was evolving. So we put together a website which is tagged onto my own photography website, because I am a photographer. And I comped together, it's a Photoshop job this, it's not really but it is a shot of the Gilster beer, and it is a shot of 2 Jeeps. So this was to sort of give an impression of what we would be driving in, and we would be celebrating the 70th anniversary of the formation of the Long Range Desert Group. They had just 6 weeks to get together their equipment. We've had a couple of years. Bit of a jump, but this year, being in Libya, how much of your equipment will be what? Sorry, Expeditions West. Will be original? Oh, good question. Yep, the Jeeps. The only thing that's unoriginal is the floor pan on one and the engine's Hotchkiss, but most of the steel on it is 1943. The gearboxes were both all right. They've had new bearings and seals. The axles were fine. So they're pretty well 2 original 1943 Jeeps. We will be wearing proper clothes, not heavy old canvas stuff. You know, it's just, and we won't be decorating them with pretend guns and things. So they'll just be Jeeps as they look in the pictures now. Right, quite by chance, the trip I've just done to Libya, part of it was going to be in Mosul anyway. The archaeologists I was working with wanted to look at a whole load of new archaeological sites identified on satellite images around Mosul. So, quite by chance, we were there on the 11th of January, which is precisely 70 years after the Long Range Desert Group attacked Mosul. And it's well written up. So the write-ups say they entered the Mosul town, found the fort, which was occupied by Italian soldiers at that time, and then found the airfield, blew up the hangar and blew up the airplanes, 3 airplanes that were in it. So as you drive into Mosul, this fort is over to the right, and it says Mosul Fort, there's a big sign. So we drove around, and I was with Kevin White, and we made some film and we sort of took some pictures thinking, well, this must be the fort. But reading the accounts, it just didn't add up, because they mentioned people strolling around at lunchtime, and they didn't mention a mosque. Anyone who drove into that fort, the mosque is the most dominant thing. And also, it said the airfield was quite close, so I thought, well, this is probably it, but we weren't convinced. Now, at least we were there on the day. There was no ceremony attached. But then, 3 hours drive back to where we were based, in a building, not in tents, where the main group is based in Germany. I got talking to Dr. Martin Sterry. Now, Martin's just got his doctorate, and his specialist subject is analysing aerial photography and satellite imagery, remote sensing, but looking for archaeological finds. And he's very, very good. So I had a word with Martin and said, what do you reckon on Mosul? Do you think there is still anything left of the airfield? And he had, that's the barracks in the medieval fort. Martin had a 1958 aerial photograph, black and white. Perfect. So we looked at that, and the arrow on the left, top left, points at the old fort, which we photographed. But the arrow bottom left points to another fort. Now, in the descriptions I've read, they say they came in on the Seba Road from the north, which is, well, it's a vague line. How do you spell this place? Muzuk, M-U-R-Z-U-Q. They said the Muzuk, the road from Seba to Muzuk came straight into the fort. Now, in 1958, you can see there is a faint line, because the roads would have been sand there, a faint line that leads straight to this second fort. Right? So we thought, blimey, we've got it wrong. We found the wrong fort. It must be that one. And then Martin looked over to the right there, where the third arrow is, and said, well, look, there's quite a defined rectangular structure there that could be the remains of a hangar. So I thought, well, damn, we're going to have to go back. So we got another get out of jail free list and made another visit to Muzuk. in the hope of finding these. We looked at the modern Google Earth image, and they're all still there. Everything's still there. There's a slight bit of hangar showing. The new fort looks still in use, and although there's far more roads between 1958 and 2011, obviously, it all looks to still be there. So that's the fort seen in Google Earth. It's obviously still used. Now, I did do a short video, Martin. We'll perhaps see it later. But we approached from the road to the north, and the chap who was with us said we'll have to ask permission to photograph the fort because it is the Army's place. So I strapped a little camera to the Land Rover and did an MPEG video arriving at the gates, just in case they said no. Cheats, but I got away with it. Anyway, we waited there for 2 hours, and we would have had to phone the Minister of Defence, so it wasn't really worth it. So imagine it from the air anyway. Now, in the accounts, they say they came straight up to the front and took a direct hit on one of the turrets. So that sort of didn't relate very well to the medieval mud brick one anyway. So we thought, well, it must be this fort. I'm now convinced it is. And then the hangar on the modern Google Earth image is also still there. I didn't quite know what to expect, but when we drove there, it was in such good condition that a group of builders got a new roof on it in a month, and it could be used again. There was no evidence of the planes, just a few old bones and bits of scrap car were left there. But that was definitely it. And there was an old farmer working there in the fields, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's the Italian airfield," because he wasn't old enough to remember it, but his parents probably would have referred to it as the Italian airfield. And in fact, there is a picture in Bill Kennedy Shaw's book, his account of this raid, where they photographed it as they retreated with smoke billowing from the roof, and you can clearly see those two windows on the 1941 image. I don't know how much of this damage was done back in 41. It's probably more recent, but there's certainly quite a few bullet holes in the upper areas of the outside. But nothing, absolutely nothing in it. I'm surprised it's not been reused for something else. You'd think you could put a bit of a fence across and keep animals in it. Thanks, Sam. I'm not the first to photograph it now. I thought I'd made a discovery, but I found that a previous trip has also found this, but they got the wrong fort. So we were ready to go. We've done a lot of research into it. Sam's something of an expert. I've been to quite a few long-range desert group places now. We've launched the website, and we have 3 people who are almost signed up to come. We need 5 really, 4 would do it a push. So if you know anyone who fancies the trip of a lifetime in 2 authentic Jeeps, but with the comfort of an air-conditioned Land Cruiser if they get tired, it'll be the real thing. It'll be 12 days of pure desert driving, camping out under the stars. We're going to go to Shaw's Cave, where the cave of the swimmers cave, and I might even play the English Patient on my laptop in the very spot it was based on. Then we'll come up, skirting around the Great Sand Sea, which is an area of sand as big as and then back up to Seawell, the long-range desert group were based. For some of the years they were operating, they were based there and Kufra, but we'll be certainly going to Seawell. Kufra's in Libya, and then back to Alexandria for the Ice Cold in Alex moment, where we shall drink a toast. Then the guests will fly back to wherever they come from, and I'll load the Jeeps onto a ferry and rumble back to Italy and then to England. So that concludes that. This is a shot from a few years ago of poor old Dolly the sheep who came along live. It's a good way of keeping meat fresh, and got butchered and eaten very quickly. Right, well, that's the presentation. Now I'm very happy to take any questions. We need to sort of revert back to the full screen.
Excellent, Toby. That's fantastic. It kind of wishes you could get out to the desert straight away and leave the cold UK winter behind.
Yeah, I can recommend it. Yeah.
Would you like to share that video clip, and we can see if we can?
Let's try it. How do I get back to the main page?
So if you just click stop sharing as part of the window. Okay, I will.
Oh, I got it.
And then share file.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And then share file.
Right, let's see if it works. Because this is approaching the fort. And just before I hit the go button, you'll see there's two half-asleep soldiers on the right there. And the fort is ahead. So the view the long-range desert group would have had in 1941 was very, very similar to this.
I'm not seeing any video, Toby. You might not have clicked.
Not working?
No. Okay. I don't think you were sharing the file. But don't worry, we've got a couple.
I can see it on mine.
No, that's okay, Toby. We've got a couple of questions.
Yeah,
in terms of a little bit of the unrest that's going on in North Africa, to Tunisia, Egypt, do you see anything during this trip, and what's the feeling about it impacting your future trip?
I think the feeling is of concern but not worry at this stage. Having driven through Tunisia just last week and been greeted with friendly waves and smiles everywhere, you have to remember that they don't. None of them have an argument against a tourist. They have an argument against their president. Plus, the hot spots are usually the centre of the cities, not out in the desert. So we're keeping an eye on it, and obviously if it does deteriorate beyond all control, then we will have to abandon it. But I don't think that'll happen. I'm fairly confident because we'll be going into the edge of Cairo and then straight out into the desert. There'll be nothing in the desert. That's the beauty of deserts. There's nothing there.
And then another question that came in from Ria Nuno around the Great Sand Sea. Are you heading as far as that?
Yeah, we'll be going down. There's a map on our website actually. We go down almost to the border with Sudan, and then cut across to WWII, and then come back up. And depending on how we get on and how everything performs, we'll either do some of the Great Sand Sea or we'll skirt around it. The last time, back in 2004, we skirted round it because it's very difficult. And if you've got to keep moving, you can't afford the time to stop for 3 hours to unstick a car. Because the Great Sand Sea is great and it's sand, so that it's huge. We'll see. But the route's pretty defined, but we have to leave a few options open.
And tell me now quickly on the unrest again, just on Tunisia. You said there were no issues there because that's a very popular overland port of call, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt.
I've not been to Niger. No, just Libya and Algeria and Tunisia. Libya's fine. You know, I feel safer in Libya than anywhere else, really. And Tunisia's fine as well. You know, the trouble is, we all watch so much television. Well, I haven't got one, but if you send a film crew out to film the troubles in Tunisia, they're going to film the troubles and not going to film the people having a meal in a restaurant just behind them.
Yeah, very true.
They don't distort it, but they just show the worst bits. And I'm a photographer, so if I used to do a bit of news photography, and you know, I'd have to distort the picture to show what the editor wanted, because friendly pictures don't sell newspapers.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. And a couple more questions. In terms of how much preparation work do you still have left to do before you head off in a few months' time?
Well, I only got back last night, so I've got to check up on the Jeeps tomorrow with Matt. But one's finished. I've got that here now in Leicester. The Woolies is finished, but I just have to get it registered, and that process was well underway when I left just after Christmas. So ostensibly both the Jeeps are finished. The plan is to take them down to catch the ferry from Venice. One will go in the back of my Land Rover 101. So there's a little bit of adaptation to do for that. But we fitted it in the back. We've just got to make some decking to spread the weight of it and put some anchor points in. Then the second Jeep will go in a trailer behind the 101. Now the 101 comes in under 2 tons. So if you stick a ton Jeep in the back of it, that is up to 3 tons, it'll be towing a ton. So it'll be slow but not impossibly slow. So that we're going to have 4 days to get down to Venice. Then it's a 4-day ferry from Venice to Alexandria. Then we meet the others who fly to Cairo. We meet them in Cairo. So it's planned and everything's in place almost. You still there?
Yeah, still here. Did you see the new question that's just popped up? Any way of heading north through the Great Sand Sea?
The Great Sand, it's very big, you know. I mean, have a look at the Great Sand Sea on Google Earth. I think it'll take about a month to traverse the north from south to north. I think we'll probably go into it a bit and see how we get on, or we might just cut across a narrow bit on the way back. But, you know, if you're thinking the Great Sand Sea, it's as big as Great Britain. I think roughly as big as Great Britain, with dunes 300 meters high. So it's a brave man that goes in there in a small car. It can be done, and they did find routes in the war. But we'll see when we get there. Last time we went through there, Mahmood rolled his Land Rover, so he's a bit reluctant. It was all right. He's got a bit of a fear going now.
Oh, absolutely. One way to put you off revisiting that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I think we'll draw tonight's session to a close. Toby, just a huge word thanks very much for sharing some of your photographs and your experience. We'll definitely have to get you on just to share a little bit more around the archaeology and some of the geology of North Africa, and so that at least when we head there overland, we at least know what's going on.
Yeah, it was a busy place 2,000 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And to our guests who kindly joined us on tonight's session, thank you very much, and thanks for joining in and asking the questions. So just to recap, we won't have a session next week, but we will have one in 2 weeks' time again. So please keep checking the website, and I will send out an email. And the session will be available on YouTube and as an MP3 download in about a week's time. So thanks very much, everybody, and we will look forward to seeing you online again. And Toby, cheers and enjoy the rest of your beer.
You spotted that, didn't you? Timothy Taylor's landlord, lovely stuff, yeah. After a dry month in Libya.